And when we write a love story, make me believe that these people are in love. Hey everyone, and welcome back to season 2 of Oh That Girl Reads. I am your host, that girl, Bria, and today is like the first episode back, okay? We're in season 2. I'm very excited because I have a few different things planned out for this season. I really want to challenge myself and develop in creating this show, and I'm just really excited about all these changes. But today I figured that we would just start off real super light, real chill with this season. And I just wanted to like reflect on the last year or like the last season, I guess. Maybe that's not super light, but I was thinking about last year's reading goal, right? And that was to have a no romance of 2023. Was I successful in that? Absolutely not. I read tons of romance in 2023, and I think I started reading romance in March. So I think I broke that pretty early on. But what was interesting to me was looking back at all of the reasons why I actually didn't want to engage with romance anymore. One of the main reasons why I felt that I just really wasn't connecting with the romance that I was reading in 2022 that made me create my 2023 reading goal of no romance at all. I think it had a lot to do with the fact that a lot of the romances that I was reading, I actually didn't believe that these people were in love. I didn't believe they had actual love and respect for each other. In fact, it felt kind of forced most of the time when I was reading those romances in 2022. And I think that sentiment is kind of shared amongst a lot of readers who really got into romance over, the past couple of years. It feels like there's not really much of a connection between the characters before we get into the sexual parts of the stories. For me personally, in the way that I operate in my own personal relationships, it takes a lot of trust and care and foundation in order for me to want to have like a sexual experience with somebody, or want to connect physically in that way. And it's not that I feel like every book should express its way in that manner, but I feel like I at least need to feel some sort of energy between these characters. And I think a lot of other readers feel this way. I mean, you've had this trend going on, where people like make the scoreboards or like graphs or maybe a chart of whether or not they feel like certain book couples will end up with each other or stay married by the end of the book. Like after the happily ever after, do they actually make it? And I'm not surprised when I'm not surprised when it's actually showed that most of the characters that these readers engage with, they actually don't believe will stay together. Like they look at some of the character traits of either the heroine or the hero, or of the couple in general, and they're just like, nope, nope, that sounds like a toxic ass situation. And what made me kind of reconsider this was I'm actually rereading All About Love by Bell Hooks. And everyone loves bell hooks, okay? Everyone loves All About Love, but there's a specific passage in her chapters Values Living by a Love Ethic that really calls to home with what I've been thinking in terms of like how I engage with media and books and stuff like that when it comes to love and how I'm supposed to believe people are in love. So let me read this to you real fast. Embracing a love ethic means that we utilize all dimensions of love: care, commitment, trust, responsibility, respect, and knowledge in our everyday lives. We can successfully do this only by cultivating awareness. Being aware enables us to critically examine our actions to see what is needed so that we can give care, be responsible, show respect, and indicate a willingness to learn. Understanding knowledge as an essential element of love is vital because we are daily bombarded with messages that tell us love is about mystery, about which cannot be known. We see movies in which people are represented as being in love who never talk with one another, who fall into bed without ever discussing their bodies, their sexual needs, their likes and dislikes. Indeed, the message received from the mass media is that knowledge makes love less compelling, that it is ignorance that gives love its erotic and transgressive edge. These messages are often brought to us by profiteering producers who have no clue about the art of loving, who substitute their mystified visions because they do not really know how to genuinely portray loving interaction. When I was reading this, and it literally set off a light bulb in my head about, oh, that is why. That is why I was so irritated with just what I was reading in terms of romance. These people, they didn't know each other, they didn't consult each other, they didn't consider each other. And like when you take like this definition of love or of having a love ethic and you put it up against the characters that I was experiencing, rarely do they ever hold those values, and rarely does it ever seem like they're working towards holding those values of care, commitment, respect, of like giving knowledge about one another, and caring about one another in that way. And I think it's because of this fantasy of like how we as a society view love as like something that's like not understood, and it's something that's not practiced. And I think, I know there's some beef with Kennedy Ryan right now. I don't know what's going on. I found this like really odd corner of the internet where, and it's weird because it's like a group of Black women who are just like shitting on Kennedy Ryan's work, kind of calling it that trauma, love, struggle stuff. But I actually don't feel that way, in particular about Kennedy Ryan's work. Kennedy Ryan, she doesn't hide away from real life, okay? Like real life exists within her love stories. And while those real life things are really difficult, there is the act of love that is happening within those stories. And I think it was interesting because Kennedy Ryan's book, I believe, Before I Let Go, was the first romance read I had in 2023. Don't quote me on it because I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure it was. And the reason why I really connected with that story was because it was real life. It was a lesson in learning how to love somebody through tragedy, right? If you're in love with somebody, if you're committed with somebody, you're likely going to be living traumatic experiences with that person throughout their lives, throughout your life. And it's like, how do you to show up to those moments? How do you show commitment, care, trust, all those other traits that are within the love ethic? How do you show those to each other? And I feel like Kennedy Ryan's work actually explored that. The Black female characters do get that happy ending at the end of the day. So it's not like she's denying any sort of love or connection. It's just telling the realities. When I speak on this, I'm also aware of the fact that like sometimes like we want to, as Black women in particular, or as just Black people, we also want to live in a fantasy, in some sort of fantasy or reality. And maybe Kennedy Ryan's work isn't that fantasy. Maybe that is Kennedy Ryan's work is a romance that is a reality in love, and that you should feel encouraged that you could also live that love. And then maybe the people who are providing you the fantasy are the people who are providing you the fantasy, are providing you the entertainment. I don't think that makes her work any less valuable, or I don't think it makes it problematic either. So I think there's also an expanded view of romance that we could also take in terms of the genre. Like it doesn't have to be this like overly fluffy thing, and it also doesn't have to be so serious all the time or struggle love. I think there's always a balance, and there's a balance that you can create in your creation of what you're reading. Another thing though is that I think there needs to be a clear separation of erotica versus romance, right? Erotica, it's raunchy. You're gonna get sex on every page, and sometimes you want that. Like sometimes that's what you want to engage with, and that's what you need. But then other times it's like, no, I want an actual love story. And when we write a love story, make me believe that these people are in love. I think authors have also lost the art of creating yearning. How is it that I've read 360 pages of your book and I don't like either of these characters? How do I have no desire for anybody in this story? Why don't I care about anybody? Why don't I care if they get together? Like, we need to create yearning and longing. And I think that's like why a lot of people have been drawn to K dramas and like romantic content that is made outside of the US. Because I feel like in like the US in particular, like our pop culture and media, the sex and the like romantic moments happen so quickly. Like, like they say in K dramas, you wait like 6 or 7 episodes or even a whole season before you get them to hold hands, and then you're like, oh my god, they're holding hands. Like, that's the stuff. That's the tension and the yearning that like I feel like is missing in most writing these days. And we need to get back into that. We really do. We need to get back into making love exciting and like something that you're like, oh my god, is this gonna happen? Like a good will they won't they tension that is so good for the plot. Also, like I want us to get rid of this formulaic third act breakup situation where it's like, okay, they're together or like they don't know each other or they have beef with each other or da 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 da, whatever, the beginning. And then it's the middle where they're like together and they're like in love. That's the fun part where they get to know each other and stuff like that. And you're like, oh my god. And then they confess. And then they break up and it's like 20 pages left of the book. And then one of them does like a grand gesture and then the story's over. Like, the predictability is nice in a sense, but also give me more. You have it in you. You have it in you. I know you do. Give me more, okay? So, that being said, I really understand where I was at in terms of like not wanting to read romance. And I think once I found for myself like what is considered a good romance to me, that's when I was like really, really hype about reading romance again. That's when I felt like, okay, I'm not getting sex 24/7. Like it felt like I was being overly exposed to sexual content. And I think it's because of like the mismarketing of like erotica versus like romance, even though some romance is more like erotica leaning, which I've been noticing, which isn't a problem. Like I think like the sex part does have like a real true and valued place in romance. Like I feel like it has like such a valued place. I feel like because people are like so gunning for like the spice in books, like the first question out of someone's mouth when they hear romance is it spicy? Even when it comes to YA books, I'm gonna be real with you. Like, YA books do sometimes feature sex, but it's gonna be very light if it's in there, or it's gonna be fade to black, or it's just gonna be alluded to in the next page. Like, it's not even gonna be like a fade to black. Like, you're not even gonna realize that they did the do. It's gonna be like 2 chapters later where they're like, yeah, and then we had sex that one time. You're gonna be like, what? Like that's like that's like the experience with YA. So if you see a YA tag on someone's video making a recommendation, please don't let the first question to be out of your mouth is it spicy? No, it's not. No, it's not. But like relax. You're like in your 20s. There's some really great like adult sexy books you don't need. Yeah, okay. Anyway, that sounded judgmental as fuck, so we're moving on. But yeah, so that is kind of what I've been thinking about lately in terms of like my reading goals. I'm not gonna do any genre bans on myself. I obviously that didn't work. I'm also kind of getting rid of this reading goal situation in the sense that like I am trying out 15 books for this year in terms of reading. We'll see. I feel very overwhelmed by TBRs right now, and I'm just getting rid of the whole notion of having a TBR. One thing that I do want to do is that, I'm utilizing the library a lot more. I want to have a one in, one out system. So I return a book to the library, and then if I feel like it that day, I take a book out. But I'm not bringing home stacks of books anymore. I'm not doing book hauls, okay? I'm overwhelmed. And I think a real thing is something called cognitive overstimulation. And that is something that I realize I suffer with a whole bunch. Like sometimes, like, because I love podcasts, I love, watching long form videos, I love that stuff. But sometimes, like, someone talking to me about like a heavy subject for a long period of time, or even just like talking in general about a specific topic where I'm supposed to be focusing or concentrating, it's too much. And I think that I've also kind of experienced that with reading, where it's kind of like, okay, I'm getting too much input and not enough output. So that's where I'm at with reading. I think 15 books should do me good this year, even though I'm also in the mood to be reading series right now. So I'm wondering how that's going to shape up in terms of my reading. Like, is my reading for this year only going to be series? That would be insane. I'd probably only get like 3 series done if I'm doing like 15 books total, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I also was kind of thinking about like, with kind of reading goals and things like that, and how every year we have this discussion online, and it's not a new discussion. Like I've seen this discussion since like the booktube days where booktube was super popular. But it's about like the reading goals and the number goals and how much people read within a month or how much people read in a year. And, people just being like, oh my God, like, how do you read that much? And I, so I get it as like a low reading goal girly. I, um, I get it in a sense, but I also think like we need to stop like shelf peeping. Like get out of people's bookshelves. Like that's none of your business. Let people read how much or how little they want to read. Don't be so judgmental about it. Know that people have very full and diverse and gorgeous lives outside of reading, no matter how much they do read. And how much they read is dependent on their specific lives. And you don't need to compare yourself to another person. But I also think there's like a really real thing about reading stamina as well. And I'm someone who has like a very, very low reading stamina. Like you will not catch me reading like 7 books in a month. That is insane. If I read 7 books once last year, and then I didn't read for 4 months. I read 7 books in a month and I didn't read for 4 months. And legitimately, when I say you will never catch me reading 7 books in a month ever again. You will never catch me reading 7 books in a month ever again. I I'm not doing that to myself. That was too much. It literally exploded my brain. And I think it created this thing where after I did that 7 month sprint, is what I'll call it, I barely liked what I was reading for the rest of the year. Like I barely tolerated reading. And the only thing that really got me back into reading was switching genres into like really intense adult fantasy. Like now my brain is like a fantasy sci-fi brain, and everything sounds interesting and like really cool in that genre, which is unusual for me because while I do enjoy fantasy, it's not my most read genre. It's usually romance and literary fiction. That's usually where my happy place is. But yeah, no, I wasn't gelling with it. Was not gelling with it by the end of the year. And I think it's because I really pushed past my, my actual reading stamina. And so I think there's people who kind of have a low reading stamina, which is me, a medium reading stamina, and a high one. And those people who have high reading staminas are going to read fast. They're going to chug through things. They're going to choose reading over scrolling through social media, or choose reading over watching TV. It's going to look different for them. Or they're going to consume more audiobooks, or they have a Kindle, and like for some reason reading on a Kindle makes you blitz through books. I don't know why. Maybe it's because it's less daunting than a physical book, but when I read on a Kindle, I'm like I can finish a book in like 2 days. So I honestly think that everyone is really different, and I think it's just accepting where you are in terms of like your reading stamina. And then maybe like if you're on social media and you get into the comparison game a lot, maybe it'll just benefit you to find readers who match your reading stamina. Like find content creators who match your reading stamina. Like I know there's certain people on TikTok that I follow. I never watch their content though, because I know that we just don't match in terms of reading style. Though I enjoy their personalities, though I like love being connected with them, we don't match in terms of reading stamina. And I know I'm someone who can feel like, oh, I need to make sure that I'm keeping up with these trends, especially because now I have this podcast and I feel like I need to be very much in the loop. But I also have to keep myself in check because reading is my hobby. I'm just sharing my love of it with you. And so you don't want to take your hobby, something that you enjoy, and turn it into something that's toxic or that'll make you upset at the end of the day. This is all for you, babes. Reading is for you. You get to choose what you're engaging with, how you curate your library. This is your space. And what you decide to do with it is what you decide to do with it. So don't suffocate yourself. Like that's all I can say is like don't suffocate yourself to keep up with everybody. Take your time, okay? And one, like 200 to 600 pages of words is not a small feat. Okay. Recently, I'm getting prepared for this like interview that I'm doing. It premieres after this episode, which I'm really excited about. And I was preparing for it, and I was kind of looking at some more academic feminist literature about blackness and womanhood, and my and kind of reflecting on my own relationship with it, thinking about the experience of the person that I'm going to be interviewing. And I was like really diving deep into this work. And I was sitting there and I was reading this and I was like, I don't understand what the fuck is happening right now. And it's not even like I don't understand the words, okay? It's just like cognitively, my brain hit its wall. And when I tell you, I started crying. I literally started sobbing. And I think it was a few things, okay? Cuz reading is one of those really it's an actual really intense experience. Like you're really, I mean, if the writing's good and depending on the writing style, you're really like following these characters super closely. You're like basically them. You're so involved in the story. And so if the story is like high stakes, or if it's like really intense or really scary, or if it's really emotional and really sad, if it talks about really triggering topics, you're not only using your like analytical academic brain, you're also using like the emotional side of your brain. You're engaging so many parts of yourself. And then when your brain is all activated like that, then your body gets involved, and your body is also experiencing these emotions with you. And so when I was reading this like academic literature that in all theory shouldn't make me feel so emotional, but because of the topics that I was talking about like blackness and womanhood and femininity, topics that I often think about in terms of like my identity, I got overwhelmed. I was emotionally overwhelmed. That is something that I can regulate. That's something I can maintain. I can say, I can take a step back and then return to it. But then on top of that, I also have cognitive overstimulation. So I'm reading this like not even super dense academic text, but there are some sentences in there. that are filled with so many freaking words that I just didn't know in a singular context, that when strung together sounded like a whole other language. I literally flipped out, and I just completely lost it. And you know what? That can happen when you're reading a regular book too. Like, you could be reading something, especially with fantasy. Damn. Samantha Shannon kicked my ass with that one, because sometimes I'd be reading some of her stuff, and even though I really connected with her work, I was like, girl, what are we talking about right now? But like, it's a really real thing. It's like you could get so overwhelmed when you're reading a text that it's kind of like, what is happening? And then you just have a mental breakdown. And so it's like, give yourself some time and some space to experience some things. Like, let your reading journey be so about you that these that the rate that you're reading, the amount that you're reading doesn't matter. You know, this is about you. This is your reading journey. And so that is the headspace that we're going in with 2024 on the Oh That Girl Reads atmosphere. Okay, I mean, I'm not quite really looking at reading goals right now. I'm not in terms of like quantity of books. Like 15 would be cool. If I could read 15 books this year, that'd be cool. And I know there's a lot of books coming out. There's a lot of people to support. I think something that was kind of brought to my attention. I was listening to Books Unbound by Ariel Bissett and Raylene, and they were talking about how you can show like support for a book or an author without actually reading the book. Like, and I don't know, I think some people get into the thing of like, oh, I don't want to support a book that has X, Y, and Z. It's like, you're not necessarily like, like promoting it in the sense of saying like, oh, I read this book and it's so fabulous. You could just be like, oh, this is this author and this is their new release and it's something that's kind of interesting and I thought you guys might find it interesting too. Like, you can elevate books in that manner, and then people from there will use their own discernment and when engaging with the text and promoting the text themselves. That's not to say don't expand your reading, but you can share things and promote people without actually reading the book, is what I'm getting at. Like, you can be like, hey, like, think about it this way. It's like sharing your friend's baking business. Hey, my friend so and so just started their cupcake business called Cupcakes on the Block or something like that. And this is their business. You shared it. That was the promotion. You did it. Good job. I'm also really keen on focusing on curating my bookshelves. I don't want to overconsume this year. I really want to go slow. I want to be intentional with what's coming home with me. And that's why I've been utilizing the library a lot. And it's been very helpful. I love Hoopla. I love the Libby app for both like digital copies of books and audiobooks. They're my favorite. Love it, especially because I'm someone who does well when they're both like listening to the book and reading the physical book, especially now that I've got more engaged with fantasy. And I think fantasy is way more fun when it's in audio format. But yeah, so far that's kind of like what my goals are. I'm also, in terms of doing like reviews and things like that, I want to challenge myself this year, and rather than doing rating reviews and kind of heavily influencing or heavily pushing my reviews by rating, I'm going to try to establish like 150 to 250 word reviews and see how that goes, because I feel like that kind of really portrays my thoughts rather than just a numerical system. And I kind of got that inspiration from John Green's Anthropocene Reviewed. I'm still like on like platforms like Storygraph, Amazon, even though I'm not using Amazon anymore. I'm cutting that out. And Goodreads, I am going to be providing obviously a rating system, because that does help the authors that I read, especially like marginalized authors. So that's the only way I'm going to be sharing rating reviews. star rating reviews, um, rather, and then like to my own audience, like to people that I'm explaining books to. I'm not gonna be like, oh yeah, like 4 out of 5 stars, because like in reality that doesn't mean anything to me. A lot of my 3-star books are like one of my favorite books of all time. So I don't really like the star rating system. I don't think it really communicates anything to anybody other than just arbitrary numbers. So that's what I'm getting rid of right now. But yeah, so far that is me this year. That is so far what Oh That Girl Reads is going to be focused on, what I'm pursuing, and I'm really excited about like what this season is going to look like. So this is just a little introductory episode, okay? We are going to be diving into so much more throughout this season, and so for now, I'm going to say goodbye to you. But before we go, we are going to do bookish unpopular opinion. Dun dun dun. Okay, so to start, since we're talking about romance this episode, my bookish unpopular opinion is that in romance there's not enough kissing and too much fucking. For some reason, and this is again, maybe this is a part of the yearning thing, and I think I've also noticed this like kind of between like sapphic romances and like more like hetero romances, is that like there's a lot more buildup in like sapphic romances, or it's like a lot more subtle with certain things. Like the buildup is a lot more subtle. Um, and I like it. Oh my god, I love it. It's like a lot of like just yearning and beauty in it, and I've seen it in a lot of just like hetero romances as well, but it's not done as often. And I think where it could really build up is if you involve more kissing, and just like give the makeout session the same amount of pages as a sex scene. Unpopular opinion. Give it the same amount of, like, to be honest, like, do we never mind. Just give it the same amount of pages, okay? Trust me. Just trust me on this one. They should be kissing for at least like 2 pages straight, okay? Like you can introduce like a little bit of like, the shyness of exploring each other's bodies. You could like, you know, really like dive in to like the characters' emotional bodies, like dive into how their bodies are experiencing this love and this care, and like what does it do? Does it make them more excited? Does it make them more fearful? Do like what parts of like, this sounds so crazy, but what parts of their attachment styles get activated when they're kissing each other? What is the psychological effects of this first kiss or this second kiss or the third kiss? Like I should see them kiss multiple times before I see them have sex. I should see them kiss so many times. And I don't even mean like they have to be like super virginal with it either. Like it doesn't have to be like a PG kiss, but like I feel like I should see them kiss so many times before I see them have sex. I should see them kiss more than the amount of times that I see them have sex. And they also should be kissing in the sex scenes. Because like there's a whole lot of talking, which is great, but like you can tell that the whole lot of talking is for the reader, and like they're not having a sexual experience together. Like it's almost like these characters are performing for the reader, and it's really odd. Like have them connect. Like they should be kissing and like giggling and like things like that. I think one thing that also drives me crazy about like romance sex scenes is that like there's a lack of playfulness within the sex, and I think there's so much space for sex to be playful in romance. Like there's so much more space for it to like have like a little bit of giggle, like a little bit of goofiness. Like a lot of people talk about like the golden retriever boyfriend trope, but at the same time, like the golden retriever suddenly turns into a dom daddy like in the bedroom, and there's not that same like softness and playfulness that he has outside of the bedroom. And then it kind of creates this character that is in constant performance. And it's like we get detached from their character. Like I want to see them, I want to see their outside character also inside the bedroom. Like not everybody when they have sex or when they connect is it like this like sub dom dynamic, or it's not like this um ultra sexy suave. Like sometimes there's like a softness, a playfulness, a goofiness and silliness to a sexual experience that's also very valid, that can still be highly desirable, highly erotic, highly connective to the characters. And I want the characters to feel like they're together. I don't want to feel like their sexual scenes are meant for me. If that makes sense. Like I don't want them performing for me in terms of like connecting in a romance, because then it doesn't feel romantic. I mean, then it feels erotic, which is great. Like I feel like I think that's the main difference. It's like all of these different things, all these spicy, wild things makes it erotic, but where is the romance when we have these sexual intimate scenes in romance? So I don't know. People are gonna fight me. Bring your pitchforks. I'm ready. But that is my bookish unpopular opinion for today. And you guys, thank you so much for being here. This has been a great first episode. I'm very excited to see how this season progressed throughout this year. Would love if you guys rate and reviewed and shared amongst with your friends. It would mean a lot to me. Remember to read what you love and DNF the rest. And hopefully there's better outro music because Brooke has yelled at me about it. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye. So long, everyone, and thank you so much for being here with me today. If you want to keep up with Oh That Girl Reads, make sure to follow us over on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Remember, read what you love and DNF the rest. I'll see you next time. Bye.